Halo 2 is one of my most cherished childhood video games ever, and many would consider it to be one of the best ever made. With the extreme hype surrounding it upon release, the increased focus on narrative storytelling, the fantastic dialogue, everything about this game was peak. But with that being said, I haven't played this game in about a year and a half. I always do a yearly playthrough of the Halo games, so why not do all of them this year? Last year, I covered the first game, Halo Combat Evolved, and in that game, I rated it has potential. Mostly because the level design was copy-pasted, the AI was dumb at times, and towards the end of the game, it became dreadful. So here we're going to evaluate the same way we did with the last game with a minor tweak. Here I will go over combat, story, level design, and so forth. You all know the drill. But here I'll rate all of the levels, not counting the cutscenes that are labeled as levels. This will make things more engaging, as well as starting a discussion in the comments on what your guys' favorite levels are. Before we get on with the video, there are two things that you need to keep in mind. First, this will be the anniversary version. The reason being is because for one, the graphics and cutscenes are just amazing. Second, this doesn't affect gameplay really at all, meaning there is no con to playing the anniversary version. The second thing you need to know is that I will be spoiling literally everything in this game. Even though this game was released so long ago, I still think it's important to mention it. Also, I have a Twitch, so you should follow it, as well as subscribe and like the video. With that being said, let's put our helmets on, get our Duke controllers ready, and let's dive straight into the video. To start things out, I think it's right to talk about Halo 2's development. We all know that the development was hell for Bungie, with constant cuts to the game. Actually, an entire half of the game was cut, which will later be Halo 3. It is safe to say that this game could have been way more than it actually was if the developers were focused, more experienced, and so forth. This isn't to say that this game's scope was way out of Bungie's league at the time. I'm just saying that these guys were inexperienced and young. They just created Halo Combat Evolved, which was an unfathomable success. They had to top it somehow. Topping something is very hard, but being a young studio at the same time, yeah, that shit's gonna be even more of a roller coaster. But I bet a lot of you are saying to yourself, why in the hell are you talking about the development? You are critiquing the game. This shouldn't matter. The reason is because in Halo 2, it's obvious that they had content cuts. This impacts difficulty, weapon variety, story pacing, and an extremely rushed ending. All these things are a direct factor of Bungie working their ass off trying to deliver the game on time. Their main motto was saying, make someone believe that they are in Halo. Taking this to heart, Bungie threw so much shit at the wall to see if it sticks. This means story beats, mechanics, weapons, levels, and so forth. This brought their E3 demo, which brought so much more attention to Halo 2. People love that demo because not only was it a playable demo that the developers showed, but the animations, combat encounters, and vehicles that the demo had to offer, it gave the players so much hype. And once again, why is this important to the critique? That playable demo was just that, a playable demo. The technology that they added to the E3 demo was not able to be fully utilized in the full game. They had under a year to get the full game together and start from basically scratch. This is why you don't see the assault rifle in the game. You don't see the mongoose that was actually usable. You don't see the actual demo in the full game of Halo 2. So much was cut because they were too ambitious. And let's be honest, if Bungie had more time to develop Halo 2, wait until the Xbox 360, it most likely would have been the greatest video game of all time, hands down. They had the ability ability to put so much into this game, but they couldn't because of the time constraints. This brings me to something before we actually start the critique. All of what I mentioned will come up repeatedly during this video. The things that I wanted to see more of in the game, or I had a critique about, mostly because either a feature got cut or they wanted to add something but couldn't because of time. I will say this once more, if they had added everything they wanted to Halo 2, it would undoubtedly have been a masterpiece of a game. The question this video tries to answer is the game still a masterpiece even though they couldn't add all they wanted? Now, I think it's best to start this analysis by covering combat and mechanics of the game. In Halo 2, there are a significant number of changes when it comes to combat. To start off, we have dual wielding. Dual wielding, in my opinion, was the single most important addition to the game. It feels so much more like Halo. You're a Spartan, a super soldier capable of taking on an entire army of Covenant single-handedly. The first game, it just felt odd that you couldn't fire 2 magnums at the same time. Adding this feature to the game made things much more hectic. It was now a viable option to just run and gun, going into the heat of battle and just spraying and praying. Not to mention an added balance to the game. For example, a submachine gun by itself in Halo 2 doesn't do all that much damage. In all honesty, if I find a submachine gun all on its own, I'm avoiding it because of the poor damage output. The same goes for the plasma pistol. In the first game, when I was playing with my homies, I always said that the plasma pistol was slept on. Here in Halo 2, the plasma pistol by itself is cheeks. These weapons were specifically made to be dual wielded. The same goes for the regular pistol. By themselves, these guns suck incredible ass, but if you get the 2 of them, you get double the ammo and double the damage. If you get near an elite with 2 subs, that elite has no chance whatsoever. Now, I will say in multiplayer, which I'm not covering in this video, dual wielding kind of sucks, but in the campaign, it's awesome. This whole thing loops to the point that Bungie wanted the player to feel like a complete badass, because you are in fact a badass. Master Chief is a super soldier. It only makes sense to make him feel like one. And this badassery goes forward with the addition of the battle rifle, probably my favorite weapon in all of Halo tied with the DMR. The battle rifle feels weighty, beefy, and packs a punch, but there's a couple flaws when it comes to the weapon. The assault rifle and the traditional Magnum are missing. Those 2 weapons solidify themselves as staples of Halo, and for them to be left out in the sequel feels odd. Instead of adding guns to the game, they just replaced old guns with new ones, making it so the number of guns within the game stay the same. Don't get me wrong, like I said, the battle rifle is amazing, one of my favorite guns ever in the series, but it doesn't feel like added value when it's a replacement. It just feels like a new version of the assault rifle when it's not. In the development documentary with Bungie on Halo 2, one of the developers mentioned that the assault rifle felt too much like a submachine gun rather than an assault rifle, which is what prompted them to switch the gun out for the battle rifle. Then later in Halo 3, when they brought it back, they significantly lowered the magazine count. I fundamentally disagree with the developer's statement. The assault rifle felt like an assault rifle. Yes, the range on the gun wasn't the best, but it felt like an assault rifle nonetheless. In Halo 2, there is a huge gap between the submachine gun and the battle rifle. The submachine gun, although it has a good rate of fire and decent ammo count with the ability to be dual wielded, it felt lame on its own and didn't give a good enough damage output. The battle rifle, while good from any range, the 3-round burst just felt severely different than what we were used to from the previous game. The assault rifle could have been something put in the middle. They had the ability to put it in, they had the assets from Combat Evolved, it just doesn't make any sense in my opinion. You could make the opinion that weapons from the Covenant side could offset this missing gun, but in all honesty, I don't think the plasma rifle comes close to the assault rifle, and the Covenant carbine is just the DMR put on the Covenant side. On the Magnum standpoint, I can understand to not include it. That gun was severely OP to the point where any other gun was worse, except when you're battling the Flood. So the inclusion of the other pistol wasn't something I was super mad at. I'm just disappointed that the new Magnum is completely worthless in Halo 2, even worse than the plasma pistol in my opinion. It just seems like from a weapons standpoint, they cut weapons that really didn't need to be cut. The assault rifle is a staple, no need to cut it. Just revamp it like you did with Halo 3. The same goes for the Magnum. It's like they added all new shit to the Covenant side, and when it came to the UNSC, they're like, yeah, let's add new guns, but make it replacement guns. So they seem like new additions. Overall, I still love the guns, don't get me wrong, it's just the fact that they unnecessarily cut shit when they didn't have to. Then again, it was 2004 and they were on a time crunch. The original Xbox could only handle so much and all that stuff. One of the things that Bungie got super wrong was the difficulty within the game. Easy and normal modes tend to be way too easy. I understand that these modes are not catered to people who want challenge, but goddamn, you can just fuck around the entire time and just not die. You can touch a hunter's wiener and teabag a nearby corpse and the hunter would just totally whiff a point blank shot. It would make a normal 8-hour campaign feel like 4 hours. Your playtime just cut in half because the developers didn't spend the proper time balancing. Keep in mind, this is because of time crunch. launch. Hard and legendary modes feel like trying to go into the depths of hell to fuck around and find out with Satan. It's astronomically hard. In these modes, a sniper jackal literally has aimbot and can one-shot you right when you come around the corner, especially when you are on the earth section of the game. I can't tell you how many times I've died just trying to get around the sniper jackals. This was one of the major oversights during the development of this game, and it felt like it was balanced at the last minute. One of the great things about Combat Evolved was how balanced it was. The flood overwhelmed you, and if you got killed by them, it usually meant that you're either not moving or you were out of ammo. In this game, the difficulty is mostly in how overwhelming they are and what weaponry they have. If the Flood has a shotgun, you're fucked. If the Flood has a rocket launcher, you're done. If the Covenant has snipers, say goodbye. And the worst thing is a lot of the time grenade spam is a thing. It was a major failure on Bungie's part in how they balanced the difficulty within the game, but with that also comes some sort of good. Now, years later, people commend you for completing Halo 2 on Legendary because of how hard it is. It caused some sort of challenge that not a lot of games have nowadays unless you're a development studio named From Software. For example, recently, a few months back, Moist Critical gave a challenge to complete Halo 2 on Legendary with all skulls on. The lasso difficulty has become infamous because of how hard it is. It gave a sense of challenge to people. It keeps people playing even to this day. So was the balancing and difficulty all that bad? In my opinion, it's both. On one hand, it's annoying when trying to play the game casually. Normal and easy difficulties are way too easy. Hard and legendary difficulties are way too hard. But what that causes replayability, it causes memories to be made. It's an oddity within gaming, and with that, I think the plus and negatives cancel each other out. So I'm neutral on this point. But what is undoubtedly an extreme plus to this game, it's for sure the added tiny mechanics within the game that makes things easier now. This included the improvement of AI, which as them being more valuable during combat, their ability to drive vehicles with you manning the gun, the ability to trade your weapons with them so they are better equipped for coming engagements, or simply they have a better weapon that you want. And finally, the improved AI dialogue that is way too hilarious for its own good. While playing Combat Evolved, you can tell that these features were sorely needed. Not being able to man the gun in Combat Evolved without having a friend join you was annoying. Though the dialogue within the first game was funny, there weren't enough missions with you around them to appreciate it. And in the first game, you had to off your teammates in order to get their ammo or weapon. These small added gameplay mechanics just make the game a lot more enjoyable to play. You could feel the immediate difference. From what I've experienced, back then, there was a lot more innovation within games. You can tell that the developers, even though they didn't add all that they wanted, they cared so deeply about what they were creating. They wanted to add better features so players would find the game fun. Nowadays, games only do quick cash grabs with battle passes and in-game cosmetics that don't look cool at all, while at the same time don't innovate on the core gameplay. Call of Duty. But to finally end this gameplay segment, I need to end on a good note. Let's talk about the music within the game. A man named Marty O'Donnell, the man, the myth, the legend, composed the soundtracks to this incredible game and the last. Adding on from where he left off with Combat Evolved, he too innovated the same way the mechanics were innovative, including some heavy metal from Breaking Benjamin into the soundtrack, the crazy electric guitar chords that are implemented into the new version of the Halo theme. It makes you feel like you are in the game, having your testosterone levels rise every time the soundtrack plays in the game. It's badass, the same way the Chief is badass. You need to have these two things badass for the players to feel badass, and they damn well nailed that feeling. Halo has a soundtrack that you and your friends can sing in the school bathroom because it's so iconic. So, when you add on to this and make it metal-fied, instant W, like no doubt. But now, I think it's time to delve deep into the story of Halo 2 and take a good look at which levels are good, which levels are bad, and how the overall story is handled and so forth. The game starts off by showing the destruction of the Halo ring after the first game, and we immediately see the difference from the first game to this one. The big ass structure known as High Charity proves this point. Combat Evolved mostly focused on the humanity side of things and how they were dealing with the discovery of Halo. Here, there is more of a focus on both sides. Covenant and humanity, which is an approach I never thought would happen. been. Remember when I said the developers were hungry for innovation to make the players proud? This is what I mean. They wanted to do something different, something that would surprise the players. Not to mention, this is the first shot of the game. It is ballsy to make the first scene Covenant-oriented rather than humanity. But the important thing that you should know now, High Charity is the headquarters essentially of the Covenant as a whole. We see a certain elite standing in front of what are called the Prophets. The Prophets are religious hierarchs that lead the Covenant, which are hell-bent on uncovering the mysteries of Halo in order to further their goals of going on the great journey. Don't worry, we'll get to that later. So just within the first couple minutes of the game, we find out that the Covenant is a religion-driven army that has prophet leaders. We find out that this certain elite was the leader of the fleet that were chasing the Pillar of Autumn, in which we fought on the Halo ring. And we also find out that the Covenant view the ring as an ancient artifact. That much knowledge within the first couple minutes should be off-putting. Usually games offload this information through the means of agonizing exposition, but here it's different. Since this elite character is being disgraced in some way, they tell this exposition through the means of believable dialogue. It makes sense that the Prophets would go over the events of Halo 1 when they're essentially having a massive court session for this one being. Added on to the fact that this is the first time we're seeing the Covenant side of things, it makes the players way more invested. They want to pay close attention. We want to know the viewpoint of this faction. You can clearly tell that there was some sort of extreme care given to the story of the game right off the bat. Regardless, the Prophets tell the elite that he will no longer fight the humans because of his failure. After this is when we get introduced to the new type of enemy within the game. The Brutes. These guys are a welcome addition to the game and sets up an interesting plot point later. I will go more into depth with this new addition when the right time comes up. Then right after, we see the one and only Master Chief once again.
Tell that to the Covenant.
As you can see here, Master Chief had a new change when it comes to looks. He looks more beefy, less smooth and more rigid. It makes him more intimidating in a way which I love. This is his iconic look. And you can imagine when that change happened in Halo 4, I was so fucking pissed, dude. Anyways, this brings the player to the oh so welcome tutorial sequence on looking up, down, left, and right. With modern games nowadays, I usually don't like these tutorial sequences because they teach you something that you probably already know, but here it has some sort of charm to it. Maybe it's the charisma of the NPC that's giving you the orders. Maybe it's just Halo itself. It's probably the latter, if I'm honest. And after the brief tutorials, we get greeted by Sergeant Johnson. And since the legendary ending to Combat Evolved is canon, we get this funny as hell interaction between Sergeant Guns and Johnson.
So, Johnson, when you gonna tell me how you made it back home in one piece?
Sorry, Guns. It's classified.
My ass! Well, you can forget about those adjustments to your A2 scope and your...
Well, he's in a particularly fine mood. Maybe Lord Hood didn't give him an invitation.
These moments are what make Halo, Halo. Halo always had funny as fuck dialogue. In Halo 2, that shit is dialed up to 11. It's too bad when 343 took over, this dialogue kind of faded away. I don't know why, but that is an argument for another day. Overall, it just adds personality to the game. Games like Call of Duty or Battlefield don't have this level of character. It's just NPC shouting orders at you, telling you to go here and there. Here you have memorable interactions with characters which you will remember for the rest of your days. I can even recount word for word what Sergeant Guns says to Johnson. It just had that juice, you know? And after this, you get information about the station that you're on, along with a nice view of Earth. During the promotion of this game, the huge draw to it was the Battle of Earth, and seeing Earth from afar is a set piece that I love. Though later on, I do have some problems when it comes to the Battle of Earth itself. This brings us to the duality between Master Chief and this unknown elite that we have yet been introduced to. Here we see Master Chief getting ready for a ceremony that has to do with awards dedicated to the heroics of the previous game. On the other hand, it is a humiliation for the failure of protecting the ring with everyone watching this said humiliation. The intentional juxtaposition makes this cutscene so much better. It makes the story more engaging. It lets you know what exactly the Covenant does when you don't accomplish an objective. It shows and rewards the player for what they did in the previous game. It is a fan service of sorts as well as adding something new to the mix. Also, the cutscenes that have been done in the remastered version are amazing. What the fuck? We also get the award for Captain Keyes being handed to his own daughter. So, the Keyes name is still in this game, which I appreciate. And hot take, I think Miranda Keyes is a better character than Captain Keyes, but that isn't saying much since she has been in like 2 games and Captain Keyes has been in 1, so But at the same time, we see this unknown elite being branded, forever having a mark of shame on his body. This shit is dark and gruesome, and I love it. A sort of deeper seriousness was needed in the series at this point. But soon after, the station becomes under alert. Covenant ships are closing in, which causes everyone to scramble, but Master Chief, being the badass he is, says the famous line.
I need a weapon.
Right this way.
And this brings us to the first mission of the game, Cairo Station. This mission's basis is simple: to defend Cairo Station and foil a plot to destroy the said station. Throughout this mission, at least in my opinion when playing it for analysis, I started to get worried because a lot of these rooms look the exact same. The rooms in which you fight off waves of Covenant, the rooms where you can take control of the machine gun up top, the areas of copy-pasted elements at one moment or another. It just felt like we were retreading the same things I had problems with within the first game. But this lasts only a short while, and even then, the set piece of seeing the other station blow up outside of the window, being too invested into the dual wielding with the submachine guns for the first time, and so forth, it was easy to ignore the shortcomings of this level. You even get to go outside of the station, into space, and battle jetpack elites, though I will admit this time was short-lived, and at some points, mostly on higher difficulties, these elites can be very annoying. Speaking of annoying, you know the one thing that I didn't like about this game? It was the addition of the buggers. I'm not sure what their canonical name is, but these guys are just mad annoying. On easier difficulties, they are easy to get rid of, mostly because, well, the game's easy all around. But when on harder difficulties, these guys are a pain in the ass to take out. They never stop moving, they are equipped with needlers most of the time, and they come in swarms, meaning you're going to have to, one at a time, try your best to bring these guys down. Grenades don't work, explosives rarely work, and plasma weapons usually don't work very well. The only guns that are semi-good at bringing these guys down are the battle rifle, the carbine, and the pistol, mostly because you can aim down sights. And that's mostly it. Everything else kind of sucks. You can even say sniper rifles, but even then, those weapons have very limited ammo and don't work very well on higher difficulties. You'll find out that the majority of the time, the game's shortcoming stems from the lack of balancing, which is a shame. Balancing is an insanely important part in the development process. Regardless, while battling through enemies, Lord Hood and Cortana uncover a plot of the Covenant planting a bomb inside of the station. This causes us to try to find this bomb and disarm it. When we get there and do just that, a cool cutscene plays where a set piece takes place. Master Chief disarms the bomb, says a dank-ass line.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
And takes the bomb to a capital ship in order to blow it up. So, what do I think of this level? I think it was a solid introduction to the game. It got you set up with the basic plot points for what you understand without being overwhelmed. It gave you one-liners and badass moments with the Chief, which is always needed. And this whole battle takes place above Earth, but it was for sure not my favorite level from the game. My dislike of the buggers kind of made this level not my favorite. You're going to hear this a lot throughout the analysis. The few copy-pasted rooms made this sort of uninteresting. Most, if not everything, felt the exact same here no matter where you go. I mean, it makes sense considering you're on a ship, but even then you can always have differing rooms, so the player doesn't feel bored halfway through. It just felt like the plain basic level that gets the plot going, and I'm not saying that this is bad, it's just that it could have offered a lot more. The biggest reason I say that is because they did almost a direct ripoff of the first mission in Combat Evolved, where the Covenant boards your ship and you have to fight your way through in order to complete the multiple objectives. The only difference is the ending of these two missions, and that's literally it. I think it would have been best if the first mission started on Earth itself. Then, when you see the Covenant start to invade, it would have been this huge and awestruck thing. But for now, at least, since this is the only mission we've covered, we'll rank this mission at the 1 spot. This brings us to the famous mission known as Outskirts. Here, we get a cutscene that goes over a radio message that repeats the word regret, in which we find out that this is the name of one of the Prophet hierarchs. But Sergeant Johnson says one of the most famous sayings ever in history, and it is my obligation to play this thing for you.
Any idea what it means?
Dear humanity, we regret being alien bastards. We regret coming to Earth. And we most definitely regret the Corps just blew up our raggedy-ass fleet. Hoorah!
Regret is a name, Sergeant.
Regardless, soon after we get confronted by a new enemy vehicle called the Scarab. It's too bad that you can't actually control one of these things, but oh well. I think the addition of this non-controllable vehicle was a good one. This thing is huge and it adds some sort of insurmountable odds. It is this huge threat to the city that we need to take out quickly. adding urgency as well. Not to mention boarding one of these things while battling all the enemies inside is such a badass thing. But then all of a sudden, the Scarab takes out our Pelican and you're forced to go the rest of the way on foot, at least for the most part. The beginning of this mission has you taking out Covenant at a specific spot, and then after, you must defend that spot from various waves of enemies. This includes literally every single variation of the Covenant force except brutes. And yes, that includes the buggers, but at least this time you have a machine gun to take them out, or rather than just sniping them. Here is also the first time you get introduced to the hunters in the game. There is one bad thing about this though. The machine gun just shreds through these guys even when they don't have their back turned. It just makes this big reveal feel like a waste. These guys should be very difficult. The machine gun should really only harm them when we either aim towards their unarmored parts or when they have their back turned. I think what the developers could have done here is which is the easy option, take the machine gun out of the area to make things more difficult. Or 2, just make it so hunters take less damage from machine gun fire to make things more balanced. Like I said last time, balancing is one of those things that was the game's detriment. And it doesn't just stop there. After you take out the hunters, you're introduced to some sniper jackals. Remember when I said at the beginning of the video that these guys will kill you countless amount of times to the point where you will rage your ass off? Yeah, this starts off here. This is a certain part where you turn a corner and at the top of the building you'll see about 3 or 4 sniper jackals, and here you must do the best you can to snipe these guys fast, because if you can't you'll die instantly. This can be annoying for a multitude of reasons. The biggest reason is 1, there are other enemies around including buggers, so you must worry about them, while also not just at the top of the building but to the right of you is another sniper. You're just surrounded by these enemies that give you no chance unless you're extremely tactical with how you proceed with your next steps. But as I have said at the beginning of the video, this difficulty can also be a good thing. So because of that, I'm not too mad at the wall hacking sniper jackals. But after this brings us probably one of the best vehicle sections in all of Halo. Here, you have to drive across a multitude of beach fronts and take out loads of Covenant. This includes ghosts and snipers as well, even machine gun nests. Why is this section so great though? A lot of it is music and the fact that you're battling on Earth. A lot of it is also the fact that it feels like a sandbox. You can run over enemies whenever you want. You can even pilot a ghost while Marines drive the Warthog. You can pilot the gunner seat instead if you want. This mission has just an open structure that I love so much. Even though personally during this section I didn't man the gunner seat, when you do, it feels so badass. Halo has always nailed missions that entail both ground battles as well as vehicle sections. Without them, it wouldn't feel like Halo. This goes forward when the player goes into the tunnel section where I chose to ride a ghost. Here, there are some changes to the vehicles which I noticed. The gravity and ragdoll physics with literally everything in the game is miles better than the previous. The Warthog has better weight management. The steering is so much better without any needless sliding that was abundant in the last game. The Ghost has a boost mechanic, which was sorely needed considering in the last game the vehicle was too slow for my liking. These changes, and I will state this a lot, are a product of innovation. The developers wanted to do more. They wanted to do better. They wanted fans to feel excited and cared for. These small improvements do so much when they stack on top of each other. But going into the story for a second, we find out from Cortana that the Covenant never intended for humanity to be on Earth. They never knew that Earth was the birthplace of humanity. They were very unprepared for the resistance they were going to receive. This is why at the beginning of the level we hear the radio signal that keeps saying regret. The prophet of regret was too gung-ho in going to Earth in search of a Forerunner artifact, not knowing that the resistance that he was going to receive. I will say this point is very interesting. You rarely ever see villains mess up this bad in a story. Here they do, and you see that sense of fucking up later in the Metropolis level. The combination of vehicle combat and ground combat was executed perfectly, as well as giving the player an overall matter of life improvements when it comes to the game. Giving the player options on whether they want to pilot a Warthog or a Ghost. You get the option on whether you want to pilot the gunner seat of the Warthog or drive. These small options give me so much joy, even though they are little things. Not to mention the urgency of the mission. We have a scarab that needs to be taken down, and going through these tunnels and seeing the damage that this thing can do puts awe into the player. Overall, in my opinion, this mission's a classic. It is a mission upon replay I always look forward to. Sort of similar to the Silent Cartographer in the first game, but in my opinion, this one's better. In the level of Metropolis, we're greeted by one of the most famous cutscenes ever to grace gaming. And I'm starting to realize that this whole video is starting to become a nostalgia fest, so let me dial it back a bit. Essentially, Sergeant Johnson tells us that we have a scarab that we need to destroy, and that the simulation tells us how to destroy them. Pretty much in this game, that means to board inside of the scarab and take out the crew inside, and in order to do that, Sergeant Johnson drops off the tank, gives this line,
"Oh, I know what the ladies like."
and we go on our way. This mission is essentially the same as the last, except better because you're manning a Scorpion. And now you have the option to shoot a machine gun. It's extremely fun overall. What I mostly have a problem with is the fact that they split this whole thing up into 2 levels to make it seem like the game is longer than it is. You have essentially the same goal between the 2 missions, except in the last one you don't complete the mission. It is just a lead up to the next one. A couple of missions suffer from this, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Why not, after the cutscene, make it a checkpoint within the level instead of making it a brand new level? I guess it may be a product of after completing the campaign, you can choose which levels you want to play, and separating these 2 levels would make things easier for players to pick. But in a narrative aspect, it just makes a lot more sense to keep this 1 mission. I mean, it isn't a huge deal. I was just thinking about this halfway through playing this level and just made me confused on why they separated the mission. It's just eh. What I enjoy about this level most though is the fact that it is mostly entirely a vehicle only mission. Once you complete the Scorpion section, you're just immediately given the chance to man the gun of a Gauss Cannon Warthog. As far as I know, this vehicle wasn't in the last game. Although the Gauss Cannon feels like a less powerful version of the Scorpion, the inclusion is something that I welcome with open arms. Especially since the first time you board this vehicle, the NPC that drives you has a good sense of humor. So here, you must battle an assload of ghosts and wraiths, which in all honesty takes way too little shots to take them down. It just feels like the Covenant vehicles are made from paper when you're battling against them. If I'm right, it takes about 4 shots from the Gauss Cannon to take out the wraith, and even then the rate of fire from the Gauss Cannon is high for the type of weapon that it is, so it feels like 2 shots rather than 4. I know it seems odd that I'm complaining about how many shots it takes to take down a vehicle, but again, the biggest disappointment about this game is balancing. It all stems from that single point, and it's important to point out all of the shortcomings that come from that. But finally, when we board the scarab to try and take it down, we have to battle loads of elites in order to do so. I am a little bit torn on this section. On one hand, it is an extremely badass and testosterone filling when you can solo an entire crew piloting the scarab on legendary difficulty. This shit is hard, and when you beat it with all your ammo depleted, you feel accomplished. But on the other hand, taking down the scarab was so underwhelming. All you do is take down the crew and then the cutscene initiates. There is no destroying a power core, no placing a grenade anywhere, no nothing. You just battle traditional elites and then the objective is over with. Everything about this was so underwhelming, and it leaves you saying, was that it? It would have been easy, in my opinion, to just add an option to place a grenade somewhere. That way it feels like the player at least did something to destroy the scarab. But when you just defeat the crew and the cutscene hits, you ask yourself, what in the hell destroyed the scarab? Did something happen off screen? If they'd added something extra here, it would have added so much value to the mission. Regardless, when the cutscene hits, we see that a Covenant capital ship wants to slip space jump right in the middle of the city, but we get the green light from Lord Hood to go into the slip space jump along with the capital ship. And of course, ImGardenGnome does so, but in the wake of the slip space jump, New Mombasa is left devastated. This is also when Halo 3 ODST takes place, but we'll get to that game later in the year. Then one of the most exciting missions takes place, known as the Arbiter. Here we see the story continue regarding the unknown elite we saw at the beginning of the game. We see the being get drugged throughout what I think is High Charity until eventually he is on his knees in front of 2 hierarchs known as Truth and Mercy. Here is where the elite lies in the mausoleum of the Arbiter. Thankfully, the hierarchs give us a backstory on what exactly an Arbiter is. Essentially, an Arbiter is a rank granted to an elite that has been marked with shame, either from a crime, a great failure, or so forth. But with that comes some sort of promotion. As the Arbiter, the real only command that he needs to answer to is the hierarchs themselves, considering the Arbiter is their right hand, sent into battle that are deemed as perilous and suicidal, known to help squash the taming of the hunters and the Grunt Rebellion. The hierarchs then give the Arbiter a task: to squash a group of heretics that are pushing their agenda on the false promise of the Great Journey. And after, we get one of the most badass and most beautiful scenes of the armor of the Arbiter being offered to the elite. So what does this mean? We get to play on the side of the fucking Covenant. And as we make our way to the location of the heretics, we hear a memorable speech that I can recount to this day. We see some grunts fuck around and see the dedication of these elites, and we also see the Arbiter clearly is ashamed of himself. So I fucking love this opening for a multitude of reasons. The questions are now answered as to why the Covenant is so hellbent on uncovering the ring's secrets. It's because they believe that these rings will bring them salvation. We are battling these heretics for the reason of them broadcasting their propaganda. So this brings a couple more questions, which is a very good thing. Either the prophets are oblivious to what the rings actually do, which is doubtful, or they know very well what the rings do, but they don't want to reveal that to the Covenant because surely it would bring rebellion, destruction, chaos, and the end of the Covenant as they know it. This brings an interesting viewpoint, especially in the eyes of the Arbiter. You know very well that the Arbiter is going to find out one way or another the true intentions of the prophets. It is just a matter of how and when. And I think that is why the Arbiter is so damn interesting. It isn't about battling humanity. Hell, you don't even take out one Marine as the Arbiter in the entire game. His story is mostly connected to a revelation within himself. Either that be battling heretics or an enemy that we'll see later. That is what makes this shit interesting. You aren't necessarily understanding the viewpoints of the Covenant. Technically, that is some of it, but it is mostly about understanding the faults of the Covenant from someone who's part of it. Going into the level, we are greeted with a slew of things to play with. This includes the introduction of timed invisibility, which was only a power-up within the first game. Here, although it doesn't last as long, it is just as helpful as the power-up. It also is important to note that this replaces the flashlight that Chief has. You now actually have an option to partially stealth throughout this mission. It is important to note that this is a Halo game. It isn't inherently made to be a stealth game, so of course you're going to be spotted shortly after you engage invisibility, but to have the option be there is cool. It really makes you feel like you're a part of the Covenant. We also, for the first time, get to wield the notorious energy sword. And in Halo 2, this thing feels so good to use. It honestly feels like you have Commando Pro when you lunge a solid football field length in order to take down an enemy. Yeah, sure, it's broken, but that's the fun of it. I know I sang a different tune when it came to the vehicles in the game, which is true. I still stand by that. But with the energy sword, it's a bit different because it's a melee weapon. At least on higher difficulties, you won't be able to bring a knife to a gunfight, at least not traditionally. When you add in the lunge effect, it makes the weapon a lot more viable on higher difficulties. This is one of the few things that was balanced perfectly in my opinion, except when it comes to brutes. We will get to that later. Anyways, what exactly is our goal for this mission? It is to find this heretic leader who has been broadcasting propaganda against the idea of the Great Journey. Here you battle through waves of enemies as usual, but once again, the very similar architecture makes it seem like most of these rooms are copied and pasted. It is not as bad as the previous game considering there is at least some variation, but I feel like they could have done a better job at making things even more different when going room to room. Bottom line is, it's a reoccurring theme within the Halo series, but at least here they understood the flaw and did it less so, even if it still is prevalent. I know some of you are going to be like, just because the architecture looks the same doesn't mean the rooms are copy pasted. And true, it technically isn't copy pasted, but it feels like it is. That is the important part. They had the ability to add more variation while also keeping the architecture, but at the end of the day, it is a product of when the game was made, so it's going to have some leniency. What I think sets this level apart from the others is the air combat that goes on when you are chasing the heretic leader. Once you get into that Banshee and the Breaking Benjamin music starts playing, it gets amazing. When I was little, this was the level that had me enthralled, especially when I first played the remaster. With the remastered version of the song playing in the back, not to mention with this awesome dogfight aerial battle, there is an overhauled system with the Banshee. You can now boost. There's an alternative firing mode, as well as certain aerial moves you can do when trying to evade enemy attacks. Surprisingly, the system is extremely fluid and is easy to pick up. You can pull some insane tricks in the Banshee without really trying. The shitty part though is the Banshee gets damaged really easy. After just a couple of shots from another Banshee, your Banshee can just be annihilated instantly. It's quite insane, but other than that, the controls for this thing are quite good and I'm thankful for the overhaul. To be honest, this goes for most of the vehicles in the game. But after that, the mission's over. Overall, narratively, nothing much happens. It's just another one of those levels where you don't actually complete your objective until the next one. They easily could have combined this level with the next, just like Outskirts and Metropolis, but then again, ending the mission on a dope-ass aerial combat sequence was a good choice to make. Also, with this being the first mission as you playing as the Arbiter, the devs and writers did a damn good job at getting the player invested with this story and getting it going. It's incredibly hard to have a protagonist be on the same level as the Master Chief, but Bungie did just that with the Arbiter. And because of that, I'm gonna rank the Arbiter 2. The Oracle's mission statement is pretty much this: kill the heretic leader, which was the goal of the last mission, but we complete it here. The cutscene that plays before it suggests that a new enemy is going to be put into the mix: the Flood. When people first played this, everyone thought that the Flood was over, considering the Flood was only spotted on the last Halo ring, and when the ring was destroyed, everyone thought that meant that they were over with. But with the hint here, it caused interest in what created the Flood. Why are they in these facilities? Why are they back? Halo is and always will be about mystery, intrigue, and courage, and a big part of that mystery was mostly hidden behind the Flood. It's a shame that they never came back after Halo 3. Regardless, to set the mood for this level, when you first start, you walk into the facility and see containers filled with Flood infection forms that are little. At least that's what I think it is. In the remastered version, the glow that comes from the tank is a solid green. This sets up the mood so much, making everything much spookier, intimidating, atmospheric, not to mention all the gunk that you see on the ground. When you go a little further, you can literally see a battle between the Flood and the heretics going on, though I have a slight nitpick about this. In the original game, you could not see what was happening on the floor below you. All you could see were blurry silhouettes and shots from guns going off. It really made the intrigue and scary factor grow a little more. Even though you had a hunch that it may be the Flood, in the remastered version, that spookiness and intrigue just faded away when you enter the room. There is no atmosphere here, it just feels like a normalized level with a clear visual of the Flood fighting below you. It is just shit like this that pisses me off, because instead of adding shit to the remaster, you instead totally revised it and broke off the scary part of this level that fans loved so much. Even to this day, it pisses me off. It would have been easy just to add some dim lighting with an ambience of green and have the glass be blurry so players can't see what's happening. Regardless, we get to an area where dead Flood forms are everywhere along with other heretic elites. Here's when we meet a hologram of the heretic leader. He pretty much says that he's flattered that the Prophet sent an Arbiter to take him out. Then after this is when we formally get introduced to the Flood. I will say the Flood in the remastered versions of both Halo 1 and Halo 2 are less scary than their other counterparts. I really don't know why this is the case. Maybe it's because the lighting engines they used were better, which means the light becomes less scary. I mean, I guess, but that still doesn't make sense when other games have better or worse lighting and still make their games scarier than this. Maybe it's an accessibility thing where they don't want people to be scared off while playing. Regardless, I find all of it stupid. Anyways, you fight through waves of the Flood along with some other elites that chose to go with you. Here's when you come across a weird elevator thing that you're stuck on for far too long. I swear, even though it was like a solid 5 minutes, it felt like 15. It took way too long for the elevator to start going after it stops and for more enemies to spawn. It felt broken in a sense, at least to me anyway. But even then, there is more of a problem that I've mentioned before. In the first game, the balancing felt good with the Flood. They gave a decent amount of damage, but things got hard because they came in swarms. In Halo 2, they do both, giving off huge damage as well as coming in swarms, which isn't good balancing, especially when combat forms often carry shotguns and energy swords. These weapons will most of the time kill you in one hit. In the previous game, you had this fear with Rocket Flood. Now you have more of these Flood forms that are annoying as hell. Though, keep in mind that is subjective. Some people love this added challenge. At least to me, when playing on harder difficulties, it's a huge nightmare. I think the biggest plus about this section of the game, though, is the implementation of the Sentinel Beam. This thing will shred through Flood and Sentinels. This brings up the good balancing they did with the game, or at least the only good balancing. This has to do with the Flood's reaction to certain types of weapons. When it comes to Covenant weapons, the Flood seems to have a resistance to it other than the Needler, obviously. When it comes to the human set of weaponry, it seems to be balanced in taking the Flood out. The shotgun is obviously king, killing the Flood in one hit. The sniper rifle sucks. The battle rifle sucks. Literally everything sucks. But the Sentinel Beam, give me that, baby. I love how they kept the resistance and weaknesses from the last game. But eventually we get face to face with the heretic leader. He locks himself behind a shield and states that it will keep him safe from the storm. This causes Arbiter to come up with some idea of cutting the cable that keeps the structure stable. So we get out our energy sword, take out some Flood, cut the cable, and we literally play through the level while the entire place is perpetually falling. This is just a sick idea that I love. A cool touch is if you jump while the structure's falling, you yourself will fall at a slower rate than before. Then after you race toward the heretic, chase him in a banshee, then chase him again through the structure, you eventually get to an important narrative event. When we meet with the heretic leader, a familiar face drops down. Well, more like a familiar robot. It is none other than 343 Guilty Spark. Which, in all honesty, when Bungie was still in control of Halo, did they ever mention how 343 got off the ring? Was it ever shown? Because from what I remember, this bitch was still on the ring when we destroyed it, so seeing him here doesn't make too much sense. Regardless, the heretic leader then soon after tells us to ask 343 what the true purpose of Halo was. But he then proceeds to shoot at us? I understand he wants to protect himself. He'd rather kill us and be guaranteed of his survival rather than negotiate, but it would have been so much better for him to let 343 explain things so the Arbiter could hopefully change his mind, but it doesn't happen. Anyways, this brings us to the first ever boss fight of Halo. Here you must fight the heretic leader himself along with his 2 holograms. And I'm not gonna lie, this boss fight was way too easy, at least on normal difficulty. Even on hard difficulty, after replaying, this shit is not very hard. You just have to get behind cover and just spam the trigger button on the hologram as well as the heretic himself, or might as well throw a grenade and hope that one of them sticks to the heretic. After defeating the heretic leader, 343 is about to tell Arbiter what exactly the Halo rings do, but before he could finish, Tartarus, the brute chieftain that we see, takes the monitor, and that brings us to the end of the level. I don't think this level is as strong as the previous for a multitude of reasons. For one, the Flood feel like they can one-shot you at any moment in time. I don't believe unpredictability is a good tool to use when balancing difficulty. Predictability is the best, considering it allows the player to understand attack patterns, strengths and weaknesses, and has the player gain skill. When you have an unpredictable enemy, even the most skilled player will die as many times as the person who's a noob. Also, the boss fight could have been more. Here, it's just a glorified elite boss fight with other elite holograms. The heretic attacks the same way as any other elite. There really is no other difference besides him flying. It's a cool concept on paper, but they fail to follow through. At least at the end of the game, they redeem this with a legit boss fight. Kind of. And finally, the long ass section where you have to battle the Flood on the elevator is quite boring. It takes too long. In easier modes, it's a cakewalk with lots of waiting around. On harder modes, it's like going through the stages of hell because you have no cover and you get swarmed. Again, balancing is an issue, but at the end of the day, this mission was amazing considering it was the introduction of the Flood within the game. We start to understand a tad bit more about how the Prophets are hiding a huge secret, and Arbiter lives up to the badassery of Master Chief. Delta Halo is a big turning point when it comes to the narrative of Halo 2. This is when we realize that there is more than just one Halo, and the fact that the Covenant knew about it and we didn't isn't a good sign. I love how the writers didn't abandon the Halo rings after the first game. They could have easily written it off as, yeah, that was the only Halo, but we're still going to call this game Halo. I'm glad that they kept the intrigue. Not to mention, and the devs knew this, when Sergeant Johnson spit out a cigar, that is the same reaction that happened to players when this game first came out. We already know what this ring is capable of. We know why the Covenant wants the rings, so all we got to do now is stop them and take out regret. From here on out, the Master Chief is mostly on the ground fighting Covenant forces. The best part about this level is the ancient looking structure. They look like ruins from a past civilization because, well, they are. Here is also the first time you're introduced to the ODSTs within the universe of Halo. They talk, act, and fight the same way as regular Marines, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Here, the main goal is to find the Prophet of Regret and take him out. The first part about this mission is simple. You have your submachine gun and rocket launcher, and you use that to defend against a couple waves of enemies. For some reason, I like this defense of certain locations more than any other mission within the game. The reason is because you can bunker up in the ancient structure and it feels like a traditional wave-based shooter. Plus, using the rocket launcher is always fun, so why not? Also, it may be because the colors and nature that goes into the Delta Halo makes this level more satisfying to play through, the same way that Earth missions were. Regardless, after you defeat all the waves, you get introduced to another vehicle section that I love so dearly. But there's a downside to this. Of course, you take out all the enemies that are in your way, you press a button to initiate the bridge, and then right after you get into the Scorpion. Then what was the point of the Warthog? Was it to give player choice? If that was the case, then totally disregard this entire critique, but I guarantee you 90% of people are just going to take the Scorpion because it's a Scorpion. Or the other way around, because when they drop off the Scorpion, it takes way too long. So I really don't see a need for player choice if one of the choices is obviously miles better. the Scorpion. And through this excursion of massacring the Covenant in the Scorpion, I found something interesting. It may just be me, but by the end of the vehicle run, are y'all Scorpion on the brink of destruction? Cause on every run I do, no matter what difficulty, no matter how much I'm reserved, gung-ho, or anything, by the end of my Scorpion's practically done. It gets annoying at times because I have no idea when I should just abandon ship or just keep pushing through. But this whole run is so Halo. You have these cool structures with the Covenant inside. There's the sense of mystery on why these structures are here. You have some simple ambient Halo music in the back. It's just overall fucking fun. The destruction you cause in the tank is absurd, though I don't think this tank run is as strong as the last mission, Metropolis. On Metropolis, it was just a lot more grand, battling over Earth, going after multiple wraiths, banshees, and ghosts. You have random ass marines that you can pick up and they just blow shit up. This tank run feels like a lesser version of that. I'm not saying that it's bad at all. I'm just saying as far as the level goes, I prefer that tank run over this. After the tank run, you get to a spot where there's again sniper jackals literally everywhere. And to make matters worse, this is a fucking canyon, which means they can be hidden everywhere. Even here on normal difficulty, I was getting into some tough situations. I can't imagine what it's like on legendary or lasso for that matter. I really need to try a lasso run on stream one of these days. Let's see how much I rage. Then after killing some elite honor guards who aren't any trouble at all, we hit a transition to the next level. Overall, this level was great in my opinion. It had everything it needed in order to be a successful Halo level. Not to mention, this is the first time we've been on a Halo ring since the last game. But the things that it did do, those certain features were outdone on other levels. This one is a jack of all trades, I guess. For example, the tank run on Metropolis was better than this one. The narrative that went on in the Arbiter was better than this. The one thing that this level has on everything else was mystery, which in my opinion is something that is more important than anything else. On the level of regret, we start off with a cutscene that explains what the Prophet of Regret is saying. Essentially, his plan is to activate this Halo ring. Knowing how the ring gets activated from the last game, we must get the index before the Prophet of Regret does, as well as taking him out. There are things I like and don't like about this. For one, this is the exact same plotline that had been going on in the first Halo game. Retreading those same lines isn't necessarily good storytelling in my opinion. It sucks the intrigue out, but on the other hand, this level takes a different approach. Whereas instead of Chief going after the index, it is Miranda Keyes instead. And I'm glad that they put this switch here. It makes things different. And taking out a Prophet seems pretty dope. Well, at least it sounds like it is cool. Also, during your time playing as Chief and kicking some Covenant ass, Cortana will give some tiny lore bits along the way. Here she talks about how the Forerunners, an ancient race that lived before humans and the races of the Covenant, put these new structures around the old to preserve them. This means they were an honorable civilization. These, at the time, were not important at all to the main story, but of course, as you know later on, that would change. Here's probably one of my favorite combat encounters in the game. It involves some hunters. Here you have a whole bunch of weaponry scattered around that you can pick up, and right after, these hunters come after you. The reason I like it so much is because of how open it is. The backdrop is so damn beautiful, the scenery is amazing, the color of everything. It was the perfect place to have a battle like this. I also love how the game kept in the one shot, one kill from the sniper when you shoot them in the back. I wish they kept the same with the pistol, but whatever, I suppose. And right after this is the infamous gondola section that is so ingrained in my brain to where I get goosebumps every time the section comes up. Even though there is a moment that the buggers show up and you have to shoot them down, I'm okay with that because for some reason it brings a warm feeling to my stomach. Though some of this section is kind of broken in a sense. If you have a sniper rifle and you aim at the next gondola that is going to pass by, you can easily just wipe out all of the enemies before they even get to you, and you won't have to worry about it. That seems like such a nitpick thing to say, but I was enjoying this game so much to the point where I really didn't have anything negative to say at the moment, so I'm literally trying to find something negative. The fun doesn't stop here though. Soon after, you have to take this elevator that literally goes underwater, and while underwater you get to see the same structures that were topside. They fucking nailed the atmosphere and world building during this level. It is on another level. Here's also when Cortana gives us some important details. Apparently the Prophet of Regret attacked Earth way too soon before the other prophets gave the okay. So while decrypting a transmission, Cortana states that Regret was sending the other prophets an apology for jumping the gun, that he had no idea that Earth was humanity's homeworld. Even Cortana states that it is odd that a prophet would know so little about the homeworld of their enemy. Of course, we all know why the Covenant wanted to go to Earth, but at this point we don't know that. But at the time the game was released, this caused so many questions. Why did the Covenant even go to Earth? Why did Regret jump the gun? But after you get out of the elevator, you're greeted with a bunch of elite honor guards, hunters, and loads of jackals, which aren't too hard to take out unless you're on legendary, then good luck. The shit I don't like about this level is the second gondola that you come across. With hindsight, I don't mind it too much, but imagine if you were playing this game when it came out. If you saw this other gondola, you probably wouldn't be too happy. I know my reaction was, bro, again? It's just the fact that you know what is gonna come next. You'll have some flying enemies come after you, which in this case is the jetpack elites. Then next, you'll have a gondola that you need to clear. And last, you'll need to clear the entrance of the next platform. The same exact pattern as the last gondola we were on. Repetition is something Halo struggles with a lot. But here, for some reason, it annoyed me more, at least in my earlier years. I think it would have been better to just cut that last gondola ride. We then hit a cutscene that shows the absolute giant the Covenant actually is. We see fucking hundreds of carriers come out of hyperspace along with High Charity. I know I said that this plotline treads the same lines as the last game. Well, here I take that back. This is the massive deviation from the plotline. In order to prevent Chief from destroying another ring, the Covenant gets desperate and sends the entire Covenant itself to defend it. It sets up insurmountable odds and makes the player and character drop their jaw. It fuels testosterone of every teenager knowing that they will take on an entire army playing as one man. It's just as epic in all aspects of the definition. But then another shitty part happens, unfortunately. After clearing loads of energy sword wielding elite honor guards, you get a boss fight with Regret. Well, the boss fight is essentially you just beating the ever living shit out of Regret. Literally, I'm not kidding. You button mash so Chief punches Regret to death. In my opinion, this was so stupid, but this is the product of a huge crunch in development. It took this huge thing and dwarfed it badly. This is odd considering they have one decent boss fight and a pretty good one later on. But when it came to this moment, they just said, yeah, fuck it, they won't care. But growing with age, I sort of laugh at it now. I guess it is badass in its own way. But this other badass scene plays. When we get outside, we see a carrier about to off us. This causes the Chief to run from the beam until he just jumps into the water. Then all of a sudden, we see this squid looking thing that says, "This is not your grave, but you're welcome in it." This actually sent some goosebumps up my arm when I was playing this. We have this epic moment that was executed greatly. We have the somber music playing in the background. We have questions asked at the end with this squid thing. All these things are so well done, and in my opinion, along with the next cutscene, are the best scenes in any video game ever. Sorry for fangirling, but this is how you tell a classic epic tale. This is what makes a game a masterpiece. Next is probably one of the most important levels when it comes to Halo lore, Sacred Icon. This is when we witness the start of the Great Schism, where the changing of the guard is happening. Instead of the elites being the favorites of the prophets, it is now switching to the brutes. And in this cutscene, we see the brutes literally brute forcing their way into the honor guard position, while the Arbiter is approaching the prophets. While overhearing the conversation with Halfdraw on Truth states that the reason the honor guard has switched was because the Master Chief killed Regret. Which in all honesty wasn't the elite's fault. It was Regret's for jumping the gun too early when going to Earth and then to Delta Halo. So it seems like the prophets just don't want to accept the fact that they fucked up, like they're projecting. This intentional aspect of this interaction really puts things into perspective. The prophets think of themselves as higher than anyone else. They will not, under any circumstances, admit to their fuck-ups. And at this moment, when Halfdraw questions Truth, I believe he recognizes this, which is the whole basis of what the Great Schism is. It isn't necessarily about the switch to the brutes, it's about the prophets and the Great Journey being false. And it really does show how intelligent the elites really are, maybe even higher than the prophets. This whole thing is just fascinating. And I think if you told the story through the eyes of the Master Chief only, I don't think it would have had the same emotional and narrative impact. Overall, I'm glad that they chose to tell the story through the eyes of the another elite. Regardless, the Arbiter is shown where the next mission is, Delta Halo. Here we are asked to retrieve the Sacred Icon, which is the Index. While heading down to the ring's surface, Arbiter learns that the Master Chief is the one that killed the Prophet of Regret. I think this is the first time where the word demon is thrown out. This is what they call Chief. It makes sense considering Chief is a literal god among men. Finally, when we get to the drop point, we see this giant sentinel that attacks the Arbiter, which Tartarus shoots at. This thing is something that we will battle later in the game. In the game, the first thing that you will notice is the amazing skybox. You of course see the iconic ring, but the insane size of High Charity is the icing on the cake. I've never seen a better skybox in my life. And to make this level even better, the first section of this place is fucking empty. Nothing is here besides the dead bodies of the Covenant soldiers, so you can assume that the enemy that you'll face will most likely be the Flood that has been unleashed on Delta Halo. I love this for reasons of atmosphere and getting the player engaged with the level. The bad thing is they never really tell you how the Flood broke out of their containment on Delta Halo. We know that happened at the facility on a certain gas giant planet, but never here. Did they somehow escape? Did the Covenant accidentally break them out of containment again? I have no idea. Halo has a habit of explaining the sudden plot points in its games through books, which if you're a lore nut, it's probably fine for you. If you're a casual gamer that loves Halo, this will annoy you tremendously. This level also suffers from the rinse and repeat process of pressing a button to release these cylinder things. Not to mention this level is probably the most copy-pasted out of any other mission. It very much reminds me of 343 Guilty Spark. The atmosphere was amazing, it was scary, the scene was set right, but the level design just fucking sucks for the lack of a better word. This even stems to the Flood. The Flood here is the most annoying it has ever been, and it ever will be in this game. I've never encountered more shotgun Flood in my entire life with the Halo games. It is annoying, mostly for the fact that the death wasn't because the level was hard, it was because the game was balanced unfairly with this faction, and surprisingly, the giant sentinels are not hard to take out at all, which is weird. Like, they should be harder than the Flood, but they're not. All you gotta do is take out their legs, then you just have to get under them and unload. And I'm not too bothered by this in all honesty. Most of the time you fight these guys while taking out the Flood. If both are insanely hard, it would have made this level a living hell. And I think I forgot to mention this, the Flood now has the ability to reanimate dead bodies. This includes Down Flood, Covenant Elites, Brutes, as well as Marines. And during this one section, you can hear Marines firing at Flood infection forms in which they eventually meet their demise. The shitty part is, while fighting the Flood, you keep the infection forms alive that can reanimate those said Marines, so you just battle even more Flood. This isn't at all a bad thing. It is a very good thing. It keeps me on my toes, and when I saw a dead Flood form, I unloaded an extra couple bullets just in case they may be reanimated. It keeps the player thinking and adds another layer of horror to these enemies. Regardless, things start to change when you make it to the ground after going through these long ass slides, which are fun as hell. Here's when you meet up with another elite squad, specifically Half-Jaws. Here you pretty much defend a specific area that is guarded with a sniper tower thing and multiple shade turrets, a typical defense ending. So, what do I think of this level? It's decent. There really aren't any narrative points that are super important. The samey looking areas can be annoying, the shotgun Flood is super annoying, and the defense of a certain area at the ending of the mission was eh. But I love the ambience of the mission. The green hue gets stronger and stronger when you get deeper into the structure. The reanimation of dead bodies from the Flood adds another horror layer to this level. And the big giant sentinel enemies were a nice addition, even though there were like only a couple. So I think this level's pretty mid. The negatives and positives even out. The start of Quarantine Zone, we're greeted with a beautiful cutscene that deals with the speech that Half-Jaw gives. He tells the Arbiter he hopes he knows what he's doing because the Flood is something you really shouldn't mess with. And with that, we go on our way through the level. And let me tell you, this level is so badass. Not only do you get introduced to the first 4-man vehicle in the game called the Spectre, but while playing you have the badass Halo music mixed in with some metal in the background. This sets the mood just right after the speech Half-Jaw gave you. You had this mindset going into the level of, hey, I am going to mess some stuff up. And you get to do just that. The coolest and hardest part is that the Flood can pilot any vehicle within the game, including the tank, in which you actually have to battle multiple times, well, if you want to. For me at least, when I play on harder difficulties, the best thing for you to do is not engage with any enemies and just whiff past all of them. I think that also deducts some points off of this level. If the most viable option is to not engage with combat at all, then why have this section here? Maybe this was intentional, maybe the devs wanted you to rush through this given how many enemies there are on screen. I'm not sure, but my opinion is still valid within the analysis. Regardless, after this vehicle section, we are on foot again battling sentinels. A big sentinel and some Flood. I remember when I last played this part with my homie a couple years ago, we did a legendary run. This shit was very hard to get past and it took a literal hour. Just the sheer number of enemies you have to take out here sucks. Not to mention, the Flood just keeps coming no matter how many enemies you defeat, it seems like. It's cool when it comes to the level itself, but when it comes to a critique on the difficulty, I don't know how I feel about it. And afterwards, keep in mind you're on foot, you have to take out a Wraith as well as multiple ghosts. They just added so many things that once here, and I don't like it. The best thing you could do here is either jack a ghost and take out the Wraith that way, or take out the Wraith on foot and then jack a ghost. Either way you choose is hard as hell. And then again, there is another cool vehicle section in which it is best to just speed run and not think too hard about it. If you take your time to take out all of the enemies, it can be very dope and can rival other levels. But for me at least, this is one of the levels to speed run since the vehicle section is difficult, and if the best option for survival is to speed run through things, players are going to speed run through it, no doubt. And keep in mind, this isn't a negative considering the whole basis of this mission is to get to the index as fast as you can, so the urgency kind of saves the mission. But a cool cutscene plays where somber music is playing in the background. As the Arbiter and Halfjaw hurry their way to a gondola platform with the flood on their back, Halfjaw says that he will keep them off our back while we retrieve the icon. And as we do so, Tartarus comes in with a phantom and accuses Halfjaw of being a coward. Let's just take a moment and appreciate the bonding that the Arbiter and Halfjaw had. Back when we were first hunting down the heretic leader, he didn't care about our lives at all, and even states this. But now, after the beginning of the Great Schism, the flood attacking and so forth, he now calls us ally and friend, caring for Arbiter's life and vice versa. I love this brother mentality the two have. It was a nice touch to add within Arbiter's story and makes this mission 10 times better. But then, immediately we get handed a not so great gondola section that has to deal with the flood, which on all levels is worse than the one on Delta Halo when we were fighting the Covenant. But at least, the elite NPCs are more capable than the Marines, so I guess it evens out. But let me tell you, I have never seen more energy sword shotgun flood in my entire life. I died a couple times just because of a surprise attack with one of those weapons. In my opinion, there should have been fewer of these types of enemies spawned. At the end, we see Sergeant Johnson and Miranda Keyes looking for the icon. Miranda grabs it while almost becoming deceased. When Johnson helps her up and calls for Marines, they don't answer, but this results in Arbiter attacking the two. Thank God they didn't pull a Last of Us Part 2 where they structured missions to where Chief is also there and it results in a fight between the two, because if that happened, it would have been just, I don't even want to talk about it. I mean, Halo 5 did the exact same thing, and we know how that steaming pile of shit went. Anyways, after Arbiter beats everyone's ass, Tartarus shows up and grabs Miranda along with the Index, but the Arbiter has none of it and states that he was the one that was ordered to bring the Index to the Prophets. Tartarus then implies that a genocide of the elites is about to ensue. It is revealed that the Prophets ordered Tartarus and the Brutes to retrieve the Index from us and dispose of us after, along with the rest of the elites. This officially starts the schism. This level was a lot of fun in my opinion, even though some parts of the level was a lot more difficult than others. The story implementation here was great. We find out that the Prophets order the execution of the elites. We get closer with Halfjaw and become homies. And the sick ass song that plays during high intensity vehicle situations was amazing. The only real downside in my opinion was the gondola section. By far the most interesting thing here is the story though. The fact that the Prophets don't even bat an eye at the extermination of the elites adds a whole new layer to things. Inner turmoil within the Covenant was such a brilliant idea and makes things so much more interesting. And you start to wonder, will the elites team up with humanity? I mean, consider the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And in the end, this level was great and one of the best in the game. Gravemind is probably the single most memorable level for me as a child. We will get into that later, but first let's talk about the dank-ass cutscene that precedes it. As we see the Chief get dragged, we encounter the big squid-looking thing again. This guy is called a Gravemind. A Gravemind is a central intelligence of the Flood. This thing thinks for them, orders them where to go, and has infinite intelligence that spans millennia if it gets to the right stage. It is safe to say that this thing is a lot more intelligent than any Covenant or human. Here, there's some interesting dialogue that's said. After Cortana talks to the Chief inside of his head, the Gravemind can hear her and responds. The fact that he can understand an AI even when she isn't talking to him is insane. Later, we see the Arbiter come into the picture and he's surprised to see the Masked Chief beside him. Here's when I'm going to let the rest of the scene with the Gravemind play out.
Relax. I'd rather not piss this thing off.
Demon. This one is machine and nerve, and has its mind concluded. This one is but flesh and faith, and is the more deluded. Kill me or release me, parasite. But do not waste my time with talk. There is much talk, and I have listened. Through rock and metal and time. Now I shall talk, and you shall listen.
Greetings. I am 2401 Penitent Tangent. I am the monitor of Installation 05.
And I am the Prophet of Regret, Council of Most High, Hierarch of the Covenant.
A reclaimer? Here? At last. We have much to do. This facility must be activated if we are to control this outbreak.
Stay where you are. Nothing can be done until my sermon is complete.
Not true. This installation has a successful utilization record of 1.2 trillion simulated and 1 actual. It is ready to fire on demand.
Of all the objects our lords left behind, there are none so worthless as these oracles. They know nothing of the great journey!
And you know nothing about containment. You have demonstrated complete disregard for even the most basic protocols.
This one's containment. And this one's great journey are the same. Your prophets have promised you freedom from a doomed existence. But you will find no salvation on this ring. Those who built this place knew what they wrought. Do not mistake their intent, or all will perish as they did before.
This thing is right. Halo is a weapon. Your prophets are making a big mistake.
Your ignorance already destroyed one of the sacred rings, demon. It shall not harm another. If you will not hear the truth, then I will show it to you. There is still time to stop the key from turning. But first it must be found. You will search one likely spot, and you will search another. Fate had us meet as foes, but this ring will make us brothers.
The Gravemind is so intimidating. When I played this as a kid, this was the part that solidified this game as a great, at least at the time. At the end of Halo Combat Evolved, I was wondering who exactly controlled the Flood. Were they like zombies and just did shit willy-nilly, or were they organized? Of course, we saw the proto Gravemind with Captain Keyes inside, but they never really went into depth. So having this here made me so interested in the story at hand. The great thing about this is the conversation between Arbiter and the Gravemind. The Arbiter at this moment and time, even after being betrayed, still believes in the great journey. The fact that the Gravemind is the one to tell him that this is false is amazing, with the Gravemind saying that the great journey and containment are the same. Death for everyone in the galaxy. And just that the fact that Arbiter, even after this, still believes in the great journey is crazy but makes sense. Someone who was as high ranking as he was, throughout his life was part of the Covenant, he isn't just going to believe Chief and the Gravemind, who he has been fighting. I'm just glad that they didn't fall into the trope of the main character all of the sudden believing something. The devs knew they needed to show proof to this character, which we will see soon. Regardless, the Gravemind tells Chief and Arbiter there's 2 different spots as we see in the cutscene. The person we follow first is Chief, where he's teleported to High Charity. The funny thing is, here we see the prophets broadcasting some propaganda, and along with it, showing the index as well as trying to calm their community on the release of the Flood. Like, how do you calm your community knowing the Flood's just going to completely engulf High Charity? Like, how on earth are you supposed to calm people from that? But anyway, the Chief interrupts the prophets, as we see, by scaring the grunt, taking its gun, and then we're right into the action. The funny thing is, though, the prophets got mad that Regret was killed under the protection of the elites, but here Chief literally boards High Charity, endangering the entire Covenant under the protection of the brutes. I understand it isn't the same circumstances, but I find it very ironic. Anyways, this beginning section of the mission is infamous in terms of difficulty. If I were to do this shit on Legendary, I would have been stuck here for a solid hour. Thankfully, I was playing this game on a lower difficulty, on normal, so it didn't take that long. But when I do these analysis videos, I go back and play certain levels over again on higher difficulties, and with this level, I did get stuck here for an hour. This shit is tough because you spawn right in the middle of an area with limited cover, with Covenant practically firing before you even spawn. It's chaos. You pretty much have to find the nearest cover, grenade spam, and just headshot as many enemies as you can and just hope you don't die. This is all you can do. And keep in mind, this is a negative in my opinion when it comes to the game design. It is unfair to have a spawn point like this. If you die with the first couple seconds of the mission starting over and over and over again, you did a poor job. I understand that this was a possible time crunch side effect, but even then I can't imagine a spawn point being too hard to fix. But fast forward in time, this could be a nostalgia factor for some who like this spawn point and the challenge. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Anyways, this level is just an overall better version of Truth and Reconciliation. It has the same interior lighting, same color palette, and same room design. But at least here the hallways aren't copy pasted and some interesting things go on. For example, after freeing some Marines from jail and progressing through the mission, you start to see the Great Schism firsthand. With Truth talking over High Charity's intercom. High-tech races still have intercoms. Jesus. Regardless, you see the Civil War unfold, with the elites, some grunts, and even other races at points going against the brutes and their sympathizers. It is an interesting gameplay encounter and mechanic that makes this mission amazing. Most of the time you can just let the two fight it out and clear up the stragglers, making this mission not too difficult during the midsection. Also, this is the first time we have even gone up against the brutes, so let's talk about the mechanics. The main thing to note is that brutes do not have energy shields, which means they can't rejuvenate. But with that, they have a higher base health. So the key to taking them down is either unloading a needler, sticking them with a grenade, or headshots. If you do enough body shots and get them to low health, they will go into berserk mode. And you may think, why not just energy sword kill them? But that doesn't work either. It takes multiple energy sword hits to even take these guys down. So that means their health is dramatically increased, their melee damage will increase, and their speed will increase. So it is very important that you land headshots and take them out quickly. I love this change in enemy dynamics. No enemy race is going to be the same, and they kept that tradition with the brutes. These guys, you have to be more careful, and you are rewarded when using the right tactics and punished when you don't. It is a great concept that I wish more games implemented, and keep in mind this game was released ages ago. It is 2023 now, and some games just skip over this important system. And later in Halo 3 they would add on to it by having the brutes increase health with ranks, but we will get there hopefully later this year. But to talk briefly about the narrative that is going on within this mission, it's important to note that in order to make things easier navigating High Charity, we put Cortana into the ship's system so she can be able to open doors, reverse grav lifts, and so forth. But our goal now is to find the prophets and take them out, as well as try to get the index. But along the way, you'll hear even more propaganda being sprung by the prophets. You can even hear Truth lie about 343 Guilty Sparks, saying that the great journey begins with Halo. 343 told him what the ring actually does, I believe, so either Truth believes 343 but still wants to go ahead with the great journey, or he just doesn't believe 343 at all and still wants to go through with this plan. Another important thing to mention during this level is the design of everything. You have the skybox that is absolutely incredible. You have different areas of sorts. When you're inside, you get what you expect. When you're outside, you get this weird flora and dirt section, which is super cool, considering we only know High Charity to be a ship that is also a city. It's interesting that they have areas like this. Maybe it was like a greenhouse, who knows? Plus we get this sick ass section with some testosterone feeling music playing in the background. But next is when we hit a cutscene. We see Tartarus and his brute split up Miranda Keyes and Johnson into two phantoms, each going to different places, I believe. But we also see an Amberclad crash into the side of the building. It is important to mention that we see this happen in game, which is pretty awesome if I must say. But as Tartarus gets the index from the prophets, we see the invasion of the Flood on High Charity. It turns out the Flood hijacked an Amberclad and made its way to High Charity in order to control it. Smart. And one of the infection forms ultimately gets to Mercy. The fucked up part is, after Tartarus was about to save him, Truth says to not do so, as Truth is power hungry. It makes sense as to why he would want Mercy dead. Little does Truth know, power hungry people tend to not succeed with their ultimate plan. The inner division within the Covenant is something I love very much, and is what makes the story so interesting. It is what made our time with the Arbiter so treasured. Again, it was never about experiencing what it's like to be in the Covenant. It was about seeing the cracks within its foundation, the lies, the deception, and the atrocities that they cause. And to understand that the Covenant's downfall wasn't because of humanity, it was because of its own selfish nature, it makes the story that much better. And because of the story progressing rapidly in this level, along with the design of it all, this level is going to rank higher on the list, even though the intro spawn point sucked ass. The level Uprising has us playing as the Arbiter as he's teleported to an unknown area on the ring. This level is mostly an outdoor one where you can see the atrocities dealt from the Great Schism, dead elites and brutes everywhere with sad music playing. The ambience that goes on within this level is great. It made me feel angry, sad, and I wanted to avenge my fellow elites. The emotions that this level causes were well executed. No other level really does this in my opinion, and after taking out some brutes, a fellow elite will put those emotions into words.
By the prophets, what have these brutes done? They have shed our brother's blood, and for that they must die.
After that, we meet up with some more elite homies and we start blasting at some brutes, as well as some jackals and grunts. The switch of fighting with the Covenant to fighting against most of the Covenant was such a brilliant thing to do. With the storyline executed perfectly, this conflict feels like it genuinely belongs here. The storyline wins you over because constantly the Covenant fucks over the Arbiter. First, he's disgraced because of the ring being destroyed, even though he was right to focus on the flood and containing it. He then gets sent on a suicide mission, then Tartarus takes credit for finding the index, and the Covenant ordered genocide against the elites. Going through all of that and being in this moment, it was so perfectly crafted and you can't tell me any different. And when it comes to the level design of the story that goes with it, it is just you trying to defend your allies by taking out copious amounts of brutes. It isn't much, but it fulfills its purpose and it's welcome. Players want revenge. Players want to take out as many brutes as they can. They didn't have to overdo it here and I appreciate it. But let's go over the fun shit. There are two moments here that are badass. The first is the ghost section. Although this section is quite small compared to other vehicle sections, I loved it. For one, the music that plays while you battle is amazing. And second, ramming into the brutes is satisfying. The only annoying thing here would have to be the sniper jackals that constantly shoot at you. Higher difficulties, they just annihilate you and sucks the fun aspect out. Playing this level on normal or hard is probably the way to go. The other thing that is pretty fun is when you get into this room filled to the brim with weaponry. You have rocket launchers, energy swords, shotguns, literally any kind of weapon in the game you can use. I use the rocket launcher mostly because there were some wraiths waiting for you on the other side, but just having a room dedicated to letting the player have at it was great. It was a sort of like I said, have at it moment that Bungie gave us. It is such a little thing, but I just liked it a lot. Sue me. And after all of this, we hit another cutscene. Arbiter makes his way outside and is confronted by a wraith, which is controlled by none other than Halfjaw, the homie. And right after, we see the phantoms that hold Keys and Johnson. This scene sets the stage for the final mission in the game, and just to touch base with it again, I love the relationship between Halfjaw and Arbiter. When we beat Arbiter's previous level, we thought surely that Halfjaw died to the flood, but to see him here doing just fine actually made me smile. Anyways, this level did everything it needed to showcase the horrors dealt by the brutes, to get revenge, to let the player have at it, and get any weapons they want. It wasn't the best level by any means, but it fulfilled its purpose. High Charity is a mission that is more story related than most. Here, our goal is to hurry as fast as we can and go after Truth before he can go through with his plan on Earth. We know he's going to Earth because when Chief talks to Mercy, Mercy confesses. And a lot of people probably would have been upset at the fact that Mercy just gave up where Truth is going. For me at least, it makes sense. For one, Truth just let Mercy die. Second, it was a threat more than a confession, simply because at the end of his sentence, Mercy says that humans will be wiped out essentially. It is a chance to scare the Chief and split his goals. He either goes after Tartarus, who has the index, or he goes after Truth, who has a grander plan on Earth. But when we talk to Cortana, she tells us to go after Truth because if Tartarus does activate the ring, Cortana would just overload in Amberclad's reactors, causing the same thing that happened on the first ring with the Pillar of Autumn. Regardless, this is when Chief ends Mercy's suffering and kills the infection form. Do you see the message here? Chief shows mercy to Mercy. Anyways, we see a pelican crash down filled with flood, so this means we have to fight through the flood in order to get to our objective. And through our escapades of battling the flood, Cortana tells us that the Gravemind used us. He meant to displace us in order to control an Amberclad so it could fly into High Charity and take it over. I mean, I guess I wouldn't call it a diversion because the Gravemind wanted us to find the index, which Arbiter did. Therefore, the Gravemind didn't necessarily trick us. He just had other motives. Regardless, our time in this level is the same as any other flood level, but we must fight the Covenant along with them. them, which means that you will see combat that involves both at the same time. So it is best, when these moments take place, to let them take each other out and then take out the stragglers. The sucky thing though is that it looks almost identical to Gravemind, but adds a new coat of paint with thick green fog when the flood is nearby, as well as the Gravemind responding to truth over the intercom. And I will admit, the banter between the two is insightful. There is also something strange Cortana says during a part when you are battling the buggers. She states that something is fighting her within the systems of high charity. There has been a lot of talk regarding what she's referring to. Some think that the Covenant had developed something to counteract artificial intelligence. Some think the Covenant have an AI of their own, but this was debunked because it is canon that the Covenant don't like AI. And some think that this is mendicant bias. It is important to note that before Halo 3's release, there was an ARG going on that had to do with an AI taking over a Halo forum, and people think this could have been mendicant bias, but no one knows to this day. At least I don't think. And if you know, put it in the comments. Anyways, this level doesn't last very long. After battling countless Covenant and Flood, a cutscene plays with Chief going through this green gravity lift. This lift shoots him into the Forerunner construct that Truth is using to make his way to Earth, and with Chief's last words in this game, he tells Cortana after he is done with Truth, he's gonna go after her, and this famous line plays.
After I'm through with Truth.
Don't make a girl a promise if you know you can't keep it.
Overall, I love this mission even though it was more or less the same as Gravemind. It is important to note though that a lot of the environment has changed. More flood bubble things are everywhere. There's a green hue in later parts of the level, as well as the elites, brutes, and flood all fighting each other. It was a great way to transform a previous level into its own version. Not to mention, the story aspect of this level was great. Leaving Cortana behind was a hard thing to do, especially since we spent 2 whole games with her. And from the last game, Keyes explicitly told us to never let her get into enemy hands. We had to fail a mission in order to complete another. That is the hard decision for Chief to make. So if I were to rank this, it wouldn't be too high as there are other missions that are more memorable, but this mission isn't as bad as others. So it will be in the middle. So, the Great Journey starts out the same way the last Arbiter mission ended, with Arbiter and Halfjaw meeting each other. Halfjaw states that the building that is in front of them was a place where they would enact the Great Journey. Understanding this and recounting what the Gravemind said, Arbiter says he needs to get in there. Without hesitation, Halfjaw agrees and comes up with a plan to take down the doors. Again, the fact that Halfjaw didn't even question Arbiter is huge. Halfjaw respects Arbiter greatly, and even now recognizes him as a leader. Such a departure from early in the game where he wouldn't care if Arbiter died. So we start out in a Wraith for the first time, making this whole thing a tank section. I will say this tank section is nowhere near as good as the likes of Metropolis or Delta Halo, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. Here you just destroy countless Wraiths and Goats until you encounter a friendly Scarab. When you're on foot and making your way through the structure, we encounter an elite along with 2 hunters. Keep in mind this is the first time we ever battle alongside hunters, and it's the coolest shit ever. You just feel that much stronger with these guys by your side, even if it is brief. But after this, you get to a section that is essentially a jail that has captured elites, hunters, and other Covenant. You do have the option to break them free if you choose, and if you don't, well, I don't know, I guess the mission becomes less cool. I just like the fact that you have so many homies to go to battle with. It legitimately feels like a civil war has begun with you in the middle of things. And later, the coolest shit happens when you get face to face with the Scarab. Turns out that it is controlled by Sergeant Johnson and some Marines. The fact that we get to see the UNSC ally themselves with the elites was so fucking cool back in the day. This felt like a legit climax that lived up to the hype of the game. Again, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Johnson tells us that he is going to destroy the door to the structure with the Scarab while we give him some cover in a Banshee. So this initiates a flying section of the game that feels so damn epic. You have this final epic battle music playing in the back while you slaughter all the vehicles on the ground. It does suck though that the Banshee gets damaged so damn easily. The most fun part though is engaging in dogfights with other Banshees. It never gets old. But when you get into the building and fight off some more Covenant, we see Tartarus leading Miranda to the control room. Here's the culmination of everything we have done in Halo 2. After trying to force Miranda Keyes to initiate the ring, the Arbiter confronts Tartarus. Arbiter tells Tartarus essentially that the Prophets lied to them. At least in the remastered version, you can even see the disappointment in the Arbiter's face, as well as his voice. I don't think I've said this, but the voice acting in this game is phenomenal. Combat Evolved had some of the worst voice acting besides Cortana, but to see the huge difference in quality here, wow. Anyways, Arbiter asks 343 what were the ring's purpose after Johnson does his funny ass entrance. And after hearing the truth, A boss fight then ensues with us taking out a group of brutes along with Tartarus. It is also important to mention that we have other elites on our side, but they are fucking useless. It goes without saying, all the boss fights in this game were they aren't very good, but in terms of the time this game was made and it being an FPS, I think they were decent. Here is probably the best one out of the 3 in the game. You have 3 levels of this platform that you can navigate, and in the center is a grav lift that you can lift all the way up to the top. In order to even hurt Tartarus, you must wait until Johnson fires a shot, which disables Tartarus's shields. When his shields are down, do as many headshots as you can. It is also worth mentioning that if he hits you just once, it's game over. You're dead, so you must just run around in circles most of the time. It isn't too difficult unless you're on legendary. Again, the boss fight was okay. It at least made taking on Tartarus more interesting instead of him just being a normal ass brute. But when you do defeat him, a cutscene plays of keys platforming across the shit and taking the key out of the ignition. I think that's, I don't know the right term. This causes the ring to not fire, but puts the other rings on standby where an activation would have to take place in a place called the Ark. And with that, Arbiter and the rest of the elites team up with the humanity. On the flip side, we see what Master Chief is up to.
We've got a new contact, unknown classification.
It isn't one of ours. Take it out.
This is Spartan 117.
Anyone hear me? Over.
Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
Silence fills the empty grave now that I have gone. But my mind is not at rest, for questions linger on. I will ask, and you will answer.
All right. Shoot.
I think it's now time to go over the reception of that ending. It's safe to say that a lot of people weren't happy with it and ended on a huge cliffhanger, and to make things a little worse, the game ended on Arbiter's mission. At the time, there were dozens of forums that were mad at the fact that the game ended like this, but for me at least, I thought it was perfect. They ended it on something badass. They ended it with a future battle on Earth, and the legendary ending gave some players questions to think about. And about the Arbiter thing, I honestly think that when they ended the game with him, it was a good choice. I had always thought that while yes, at the core of Halo is Master Chief, but I think this game was dedicated to Arbiter mostly. He had the better story to tell. His mission was the one that gave us better insight into the Covenant. He is the one that allied the elites with humanity. He was the catalyst of future events to happen. Chief was simply trying to stop whatever Truth was planning, along with taking out the other prophets. And because of that, I think it was right to end the game with Arbiter. But even then, the last cutscene was dedicated to Chief saying a one-liner. So regardless, I think this final level was a damn good one. We had all we needed, a flying section, a vehicle section, an on-foot section, and a boss fight. And to go along with it, a worthy conclusion to the story being told. And if I were to rate this, it would be pretty high, no doubt. Overall, I love this game so much. The fact that we get more answers into what makes the Covenant tick, we get a new character to play as, in which is just as badass as Chief, we get a true narrative to the game that has never yet been topped in series history, and I also think that this game has the best and most memorable levels in the series, with Halo 3 not too far behind. So with that being said, let's go over the pros and cons of the game. The pros? The story in this game is the best in the series and has never been topped. The addition of the Arbiter was amazing and well executed for what it was trying to do. Learning about the inner workings of the Covenant, the Great Schism, the Prophets, the relationship with Halfdraw, the alliance of the elites and humanity at the end, it was all well done. The Chief in this game was more badass than ever with his one-liners. The plotline of Chief leaving behind Cortana sets up a perfect continuation into the next game. The level design for the most part was top-notch, a huge step up from the previous game. And finally, the addition of the Gravemind was perfect. He is scary, intelligent, and seems to always be one step ahead of the player. So the cons, the flood in this game, in my opinion, was a step down from Combat Evolved. They were less scary, had more cheese kills that came out of nowhere, and the shotgun and energy sword flood were annoying. The guns on the humanity side seemed disappointing to me. The submachine gun was only good if dual wielded. The total disregard for the assault rifle irritates me. It just seemed like instead of adding new guns, they replaced guns, whereas on the Covenant side, they added them. And finally, the balancing issues in this game were huge. Legendary is extremely hard, and I understand now that it is a staple of Halo 2, but it's still annoying to me, and on easier difficulties, it's way too easy. Now that we have that out of the way, let's briefly go over the rankings that this game can achieve. Last is not even close. This is when the game is nowhere near a masterpiece, and it is best to go a totally new direction with whichever game the developer is planning on making. Next is it has potential. This is when the game has some big upsides and the downsides outweigh the positives. Maybe some patches and a few DLCs can fix the game. Second best is amazing. This is when the good outweighs the bad, but because of a few huge downsides, it doesn't quite reach the masterpiece level. At the top is Masterpiece. This is when the game is incredible and it has the potential to be one of the greatest games of all time, sealing itself into the Gaming Hall of Fame. So what is Halo 2? It's a masterpiece. I bet some of you are like, but Gnome, didn't you say that there is a huge balancing issue within the game? Yes, I did say that, but in all honesty, this balancing issue isn't really that big of a deal. People love getting challenged. This is why people always come back to Halo 2 on Legendary difficulty or Lasso. This game alone had a huge community come back to watch this one dude beat a challenge given by Moist Critical. Instead of dividing a community with this balancing issue, it brought people together. I know it is odd, but Halo 2 did it. And when it comes to the other cons I mentioned, they're little. It isn't enough to degrade this game, and just to make it more fitting, this will be the first game I'll grant legendary status to. I mean, it just makes sense. To conclude this video, I just want to say that Halo 2 means so much to me. Halo 2 was a game I would always play when I felt down. It was something I would always play when I wanted to just chill out and experience a dank-ass story. And it was the first game that really got me into storytelling. Lastly, this is the only game that I do annual runs on. I usually do it on all Halo games, but if I don't have the time, I choose this game out of the rest. It means that much to me, and I hope it had the same impact on you guys. Thank you all for watching. You guys watching my videos makes me so happy, and I'll try my best to make my content more entertaining in the future. Also, sorry for the delay. I was in the middle of moving. Regardless, I think it's time for me to go. Don't forget to follow my Twitch, like the video, and subscribe. I'll see y'all later, homies. Peace out.